Good evening and welcome to our regular council meeting of March 14th, 2022. Before we call the meeting to order this afternoon, I would like, on behalf of council and administration, to congratulate Councillor Jordan Saylor on becoming a new dad on March 5th with the birth of Marley Rose, weighing in at 6 pounds. Please pass on our congratulations to Kaylee, and please give Sister Nola a high five from all of us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order at 5:03 p.m. First item is 1.1, conflict of interest declaration, pecuniary or non-pecuniary. Is there any in the room this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to acceptance of the agenda. Item 2.1.
Your mic is cutting in and out. I maybe get you to use a different one.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on to item 2.1, our regular council meeting agenda for March 14th, 2022. Any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Can I get someone to make a motion that council adopt the regular council meeting agenda for March 14th, 2022 as circulated? Councillor Saylor, any discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We're going to jump ahead to item 5.1. We have a delegation this evening, 5:05 p.m. Glenn Miller from the Military Museum. Welcome, Glenn. And once you're settled in, the floor is yours.
Mayor and Council, it's good to see some familiar faces and some new faces. So it's always good to be back here in Coaldale, having worked here the past number of years, and be able to help contribute in promoting your remembrance ceremony, helping out with Cindy the last number of years. As the Lethbridge Military Museum, I know in the past we had a previous delegation from council attend, but there are some new faces on council, so we just wanted to create that awareness that there is such a thing as a military museum. It's located in Lethbridge at the Vimy Ridge Armory, and that's a term that may or may not be known to some people, but there are some citizens in the past who are from Coaldale, have served in the military. So when you hear Vimy Ridge Army, it does have some relevance to your community. It's a volunteer-based organization, and it's started just a few short number of years ago, and it's an accredited military museum. We belong to the Organization of Military Museums of Canada, and so that allows us to share and borrow artifacts from other museums, whether it's the War Museum in Ottawa or Calgary or the Galt Museum. The timeline covers from the Boer War up to present day, and that initial Boer War start time is when Lethbridge actually first sent troops overseas, and so that's where we start our timeline up to present day. And just outside of the entrance is now a new courtyard that we have refurbished in the last couple of years, and it includes features predominantly of poppy and stone surrounded by a number of bricks, and the bricks are in tribute to community members. Our particular group, the Lethbridge United Services Institute, sponsored a stone in honor of animals that also served. And surrounding the courtyard is a number of artifacts with guns, planes, and soon to be an armored personnel carrier. All have ties to southern Alberta history. Next slide. Oh, there we go. Oh, back to Clarence. So a local resident here, Clarence Cuff, he was a World War II veteran. He was the oldest gunner at the time of his death, and I had gone to Vimy Ridge and Juno Beach on a trip, and I stopped in. I've seen Clarence a number of times, and I had the privilege of seeing him just before he passed on. The medal on the left hand, the large red ribbon, is sort of like the Order of Canada. That's from the country of France, and that's the Legion of Honor. In World War II, the country of France wanted to thank its liberators, and so they offered 350 positions or medals to Canadians, and so it was up to the communities to recommend nominations, and the criteria was those who served from D-Day up until the end of August. And so I nominated Clarence. Unfortunately, he died just before he received it, and I actually placed his medal on his pillow at his graveside service, and then we put him in, interred him in the ground. So it was a huge honor for me, and I also brought back some sand from Juno Beach and put that in with him. So just as a way as a liberation, and thank you for his service. That was a small part we were able to do, and the Lethbridge 20th Independent Field Battery actually fired a one-gun salute with their 105 millimeter howitzer, which is rare, but just goes to show the honor. Next. So I just wanted to touch a quick base on the Military Museum, and you have before you a standing invitation from anyone who would like to attend that, and not just you, but also your family and friends, to come out and see the Military Museum. It's open. It's always free. Donations are gratefully accepted, and the hours are from 12 to 4 on Wednesdays. However, just by making a phone call and some prior arrangements, if Thursday night works for you and your family, or Sunday afternoon, we can accommodate that based on our volunteers.
Number do we call for that?
It's on the website, or you can call my number.
Okay.
The next part I want to talk about briefly is the last 2 years. I was the guest speaker for the cenotaph ceremony on remembrance, and there's a number of things that I've noticed in communities. I've gone out to smaller communities, observed it as a veteran, and have noticed some communities have lost that veteran connection. And so my intent is to observe a ceremony. It might be off the track a little bit, provide some suggestions, because it's still there. So I wanted to align some protocols and policies and the process to better enhance that. As a service officer for 10 years, if you're a mother or father, and I'll give an example here in Coaldale, Brent Ginther came very close to dying. And so what does the town do? If you're the dad or the mom, you call the Legion. Well, the Legion's going to turn around and just pass the buck to the community where that soldier relies on. And so if you're one of the staff members dealing with a distraught parent, depending who answers the phone, you're going to get a yes or a no of a question. But really, to be fair to all parties involved, it's nice to be able to apply a policy, say, yes, that person can be recognized on a cenotaph, or it doesn't meet certain criteria, and take that emotional aspect away from that. Now, we're very fortunate. This is a good problem to have, because we have communities across Canada haven't had this for 50 plus years since Korea. Afghanistan, we saw close to 40,000 members over there. It's a 12-year war. He might have died in year 7, but when would that name potentially go on to your cenotaph? Historically, the Lethbridge cenotaph was the only cenotaph in southern Alberta. And so there are people from Coaldale and surrounding area that are on the Lethbridge cenotaph. And so we put together a subcommittee at the request of the mayor, including some veterans, RCMP, Cindy Hoffman, and now that the military is up and running again, we'll have some military input as well. So we want to make recommendations to your council. When would a name go up? 12 years in Afghanistan, you normally wait until a conflict is over. So that was our longest conflict in a while. Things are happening again, so who knows? So we wanted to, we've already met twice. The next slide. Oh, there we go. So here's last year's cenotaph service. And so you see the wreaths placed up. This is at the end of the ceremony. You see the flag bearers. If it's a windy day, and flag bearers are also at a premium in any ceremony. How many flag bearers would you have? Do you have enough volunteers for that? And so we're looking at where the cameraman is there in front of the cenotaph. Normally you would have 4 sentries. So that piece of real estate surrounding the top of the cenotaph gets crowded. And so we were looking at making better ways to utilize that piece of real estate around the whole cenotaph area. And because now with technology, live streaming could be a future for every service. Who knows? But we want to try to engineer that into our recommendations and costing. Costing itself, there's 2 grant streams immediately available. One is through the Lethbridge Legion Poppy Fund and the Veterans Affairs Community Engagement. So whatever recommendations we come up with in the near term, I'm not really worried about costing the town money. I think the funding is going to be available. So we're just going to provide a bunch of recommendations, A to M, and let council decide based on also what other directions you might want to give us in specific questions. We look at Afghanistan. A few years ago, it's on the National Monument in Ottawa. It doesn't have to go on your cenotaph. It could because you've had that connection with community members serving in Afghanistan. So these are the type of things we wanted to recommend to council. So one of the things that we wanted to look at is the battle honors of Afghanistan and other future battle honors. You notice on the plaque, just go back one slide there, Lana. On the right-hand side, there's a small plaque outside of the big one in front. And that's relating to Korea. So if we were to make recommendations, we can kind of maybe replace that front plaque with everything up to date and engineer it in such a way for growth. And we want to treat the universality of service. You treat one person, whether you're a general or private, all the same. An example would be in Cardston. At the end of World War I, they had a number of names. They were on the cenotaph. In World War II, they had even more names, but no room to put them on their cenotaph. So their names were on a small plaque, like size 7 font in comparison to the original. They just redid their cenotaph, and all the names are the same size. So we want to kind of engineer that into future growth if required. The flags, where to put those, and again, using a windy friendly situation. The sentries and some landscaping. We talked about future live broadcast and even the maintenance of the flag poles being placed in the ground. But maintenance-wise, they can come around, cut the grass, and it's just a matter of lifting up little receptacles for the day of, or other days as well. So that's a summary of just kind of what I've been doing with the Lethbridge Military Museum and with the subcommittee. And we've met twice, and we're going to be meeting again. But whatever direction you have or questions, we will certainly incorporate that into our discussion to do the staff check, the due diligence when we bring it to City Council for recommendations. That's my presentation. Any questions?
Thank you, Glenn. Just a question, and so the committee, are they going to look after those stands for the flagpoles? Because remember last Remembrance Day with the wind, they kept falling over.
Right, and we're looking at having a prefab similar to Lethbridge on the left and right of the cenotaph are two big, what we call the wings. We would have wings in the ground, so they can actually be placed into the ground if you don't have the people, or the sentries or the flag bearers can actually deposit those colors during the ceremony and pick them up after the ceremony. That's another option.
Okay, so the committee's looking into that.
We're looking at options for sure.
Okay, and then I was speaking to my neighbor yesterday. His son is part of the Canadian Armed Forces, and they requested at 2 Remembrance Days ago that we should put Afghanistan up on a cenotaph. So is that disrespectful to do it now, because you say it's still ongoing, or Canada's finished their service over there?
Well, the Afghanistan war, Canada's pulled out. It's been 8 years since March 12th, I believe. So that could be added. The next, like World War II, or I'll give you an example, World War II or World War I, all the battle honors were actually determined after the war. So Afghanistan would be eligible to go on, and we would make recommendations. Our early discussions are recommending to put Afghanistan on because it helps to educate the youth of the community. You know, where is Afghanistan? Canada is very fortunate. I mean, you look in the Ukraine situation today. And I also tell kids when I go to schools, as a Canadian soldier, I've always been treated better outside my own country because they've had their freedom taken away, not once, but twice. No one's seen a foreign tank come down your main street. So they've never had freedom taken away. So they can't relate and appreciate the freedom has been ever at jeopardy for them here in Canada.
And we also lost 158 soldiers in that conflict and 6 or 7 civilians.
Yeah.
Oh.
So it is imperative. And one of our recommendations we talk around, and this will be more formalized, is that the names that are on this Lethbridge cenotaph be also placed on your cenotaph in the community, because it's your community effort, service, sacrifice that is being recognized.
Okay, I'll open it up to council. Any questions or comments for Glenn? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor, and through to Glenn. Thank you so much for your service again to Canadians and to our country, and of course to your community. And I guess my question to you is that with the subcommittee, will we be able to engage you with this process for naming rights or naming on there?
Absolutely. And I'm working with Cindy Hoffman from the department.
Okay, so then once you get a little bit closer to getting everything finalized, then Cindy will come back and then maybe
do
you
a
can
future
come with
presentation.
and do a presentation on
And if
all
there's,
on all the recommendations.
that's right. And if there's any input or direction you want us to specifically look at, such as naming conventions or battle honors, we certainly make sure that's addressed.
And as far as once you start doing the battle honors, do you have all the names of everybody?
Well, the names primarily, when I just helped the village of Sterling do a cenotaph, and there's a lot of names on the cenotaph. When I look at as a soldier's perspective, I see names on a cenotaph that tells me those who've paid the ultimate price. But on their cenotaph, they have all the names who went to war and came back, and then those, I think there's 4 individuals who died, and they're marked specifically on the front and the back. So, and that's another thing you can also look at is all the people from the Codell area, and it's defining your sandbox. This is a rural area, so how do you include the farmers, and to how far out between here and Tabor do you cut off they belong to the Codell area versus the Tabor area? And so we're looking at developing the sandbox, historically what Codell's always been associated with.
Okay. Other questions or comments?
Is it all right if somebody's named on several cenotaphs?
Yes, and in the past, especially for those who won the Victoria Cross, a lot of the communities who would claim that person as one of their citizens. But at the time, Lethbridge only had one cenotaph for the area. So again, this is your cenotaph, your story, your community. What is it you want to tell and preserve?
As an example to that Walter Huff who just passed, named on the black wall on Antony.
Okay,
Okay, and then we hope to have this all done for this upcoming
that would
remembrance.
certainly be the goal. And one of the other things we discussed is there's a brass plaque at the base of the cenotaph, or base of the flags at a Lethbridge cenotaph. It's a poem called I Am the Cenotaph, which was a national poem winner. And so we're looking at maybe if that'd be one of our recommendations. How do I tell a 7-year-old today in Codell what is a cenotaph? Who's never had that exposure to a military environment. And so this is another teaching tool to preserve and promote remembrance.
Okay, thank you. Can I get someone to make a motion that council receive the military museum presentation as information? Councillor Pickering, any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Well, thank you very much, Glenn.
Thank you.
Okay, we're just going to go back to agenda item 3.1, the adoption of previous minutes. So as part of your agenda package, the regular council meeting minutes from February 28th, 2022 were circulated. Were there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, can I get someone to make a motion that council approve the regular council meeting minutes from February 28, 2022 as circulated? Councillor Beekman, any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to have a public hearing coming up, and Melanie's going to be presenting. So Melanie, if you want to take a seat. Okay, so I'm going to call the public hearing to order at 5:23 p.m. regarding Land Use Bylaw Amendment 841-P-02-22 regarding second and third reading. The purpose of this hearing is to present council with proposed Land Use Bylaw Amendment 841-P-02-22 with purposes to amend the current Land Use Bylaw 677-P-04-13 by adding personal services to the list of discretionary uses of the Highway Commercial C2 zoning district. Melanie Messier, our town planner, to present. Melanie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. So there are two main areas for highway commercial C2 in the town. So they're along the southern border of Highway 3 in the Lana Lakes area, as well as near the RCMP detachment. So this request for the text amendment arose out of a resident who is interested in leasing space in the highway commercial area for the purposes of a barber shop. Unfortunately, the highway commercial C2 area does not have that use listed as either permitted or discretionary. So the bylaw does propose to have personal services within discretionary uses, meaning that it would still need to go through the Municipal Planning Commission to get approval. Within our town plan, there are several policies that support being more accommodating to businesses, which is part of the rationale to including the use within discretionary uses. And notice of the bylaw was circulated in the Sunny South News for 2 consecutive weeks, as well as posted on our Let's Connect Coaldale website. There were no responses received to the circulation or on the Let's Connect Coaldale page. So with that, Council may consider the following options. That Council provides second and third reading of Land Use Bylaw 841-P-02-22, or that Council tables the bylaw pending the receipt of further information, or lastly, that Council refuses the bylaw.
Okay, thank you. And Mel, where is this exactly going to be going?
So it would be a text amendment that would apply to all highway commercial areas, which is why we thought it would be most appropriate for it to be discretionary. But it would leave it open to anything zoned as highway commercial. The area that she or this resident is most interested in leasing space is where the future Kentucky Fried Chicken application will be going. There's supposed to be retail space attached to that.
Okay, thank you. I'll open up the floor for any questions for Mel from council. Councillor Beekman.
Mayor, through to Mel, just so I'm clear, I think you just said it, but so this is to amend, so for future, we're adding personal services to anything zone C2.
Yes.
This isn't just a special case, right?
Exactly.
Okay,
So
awesome.
the request initiated the larger change.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor
Mayor,
Chapman.
To Mel, the list, the title of personal services, is that a standard name?
For this use, yes, it is a standard name, and it applies to anything where you're taking care of personal beauty-related, anything having to do with the body. So barber shops, estheticians, any type of use like that.
Okay, any further questions? So council have sufficient information to make a decision on the Land Use Bylaw Amendment 841-P-02-22? Any further questions, comments? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Beekman, sorry.
To make a motion that council.
That'll come up a little bit further down.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll declare the public hearing regarding Land Use Bylaw Amendment 841-P-02-22 closed at 5:27 p.m. Okay, we're going to move back to the beginning of the agenda. Going to go item 4.1, the business arising from the minutes, community flagpole. Lana, Antony, our legislative coordinator, will be presenting. Lana, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I'm here today to follow up on an item from the January 24th regular council meeting where council had directed administration to come back at a future council meeting with a proposal on a community flagpole to be integrated within the 3 existing displayed flagpoles. In my report, I included some information. The new town office located on Main Street, now called Civic Square, is our commercial office complex. It is scheduled to be completed in the fall of 2022, and it's undetermined at this time of where exactly the flags will be located. A preliminary design concept will be presented to council at a future council meeting to determine the location of the flagpoles for Civic Square, with options for council to decide on at that time. Whether 3 flagpoles or 4 are installed makes a little difference at this time, but it will be later on in the planning process. Currently, there are 2, there are 2 main flag mounting options to consider, whether it's mounted on the building or in the concrete, like on the sidewalk. The flag mount will be onto the side of the building. I included in my report there are some logistics to consider if that is an option that council would like to consider when it comes to raising and lowering the flags. In consultation with our neighboring municipalities, I consulted with Lethbridge County, the town of Taber, and the city of Lethbridge. Lethbridge County currently does not have a flagpole designated for community use. The town of Taber did have one, but they later removed it due to ongoing vandalism and then public safety issues of residents that were trying to protect the flags that were being displayed, that were being vandalized. So they just felt out of public safety that it was best to remove it. The city of Lethbridge currently has 3 extra poles designated for. One of them is for the Blackfoot. The second pole is a community pole, and an extra pole not yet specifically designed, but it currently is flying the reconciliation flag. These extra poles are not reflected in their current flag policy, and it is coming before their council in March or April, so they are going to update it at that time. I did inquire of when the community flagpole is not in use, of if there is something there that flies in its place, and they said that they currently do not. They leave the pole bare. Depending on the flag installation method that council chooses, that being the traditional in-ground pole or mounted on the side of the building, price would be determined at that time. So I presented 3 options for council today's consideration, that council provide approval to add a 4th flagpole intended for community use to the existing trio of flags at a town location to be determined following preliminary design concepts that will be presented to council at a later date. Or option 2, that council receive the report as information and provide support to the existing flagpoles as is. Or option 3, that council direct administration to conduct further research on flag mounts options and come back at a future council meeting with those results.
Okay, thank you, Lana. Any questions or comments for Lana? I have one question. When you were talking to the city of Lethbridge, like when they put up a flag on the community flagpole as part of their application process, is there like a length of time that it can stay up, or they treat each one individually?
I don't know the answer to that question. I could inquire. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
That's a great question.
Because when I was doing some research on this, St. Albert, they have an excellent community flagpole policy, and if depending on what the occasion is, they'll a maximum 7 days, and then they'll look at each item. Some of them will go as long as a month.
Okay.
And then for the flagpole location, I believe it should be in the ground versus on the side of the building. So I think we should incorporate that into the design of the Civic Square, whether we put it on the west side of the building or to the south side at street, right where the street is.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. And just supporting what you have already stated, I see the need for the extra flag pole, but maybe we need to wait until we're in the new building. So if administration could continue looking at it, find a spot that we're going to put the flags, maybe in the green strip, as the mayor said, to the west of the new town office. So in saying that, I guess it would be option 3. I would like to make a motion that council direct administration to conduct further research on flag mounts options and come back at a further council meeting with the results. So let's see what the city's doing. I hate following the city, but they're going to do the heavy lifting. We may as well piggyback on that as well.
Okay.
And then just one comment then, with these new flag poles, they're going to be electric for raising and lowering. So we need to know sooner than later so that the contractor can get that installed for it. So, okay, there's a motion on the floor that council direct administration to conduct further research on flag mount options and come back at a future council meeting with those results. Any further discussion?
Made a decision as well on in terms of where they want to locate the flag poles. Like that would have been part of their construction, I would have believed, back in the day.
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, the flags are not in the scope of the contract with the developer, so council has full reign in terms of where it goes. The idea is that the flags would be located on the municipal green space, either you got the street, you have the western green strip as well as the south outdoor space, and we're currently looking at some different options, and we can report back on the logistics involved, but this would be solely a town of Coaldale venture and wouldn't involve the developer partner. If that helps answer your question. I just had a quick question of clarification, Mayor. Just with Deputy Mayor Abree's motion, in-ground flag options is what you, okay. Because option 3, I think it says flag mount, and in-ground, I think would be the, just want to make sure we're clear just before we.
And then I was just going to bring that up as well. Deputy Mayor Abree, would you consider a friendly amendment to change it to option number 1? Because everything that we just talked about is built right into option number 1. Because the location, the only thing we need is the location, because we already decided it's going to be ground mounted. Okay, so Councillor Abree, we haven't voted on option 3, so option 1, that council provide approval to add a 4th flagpole intended for community use to the existing trio of flags flown at the town location to be determined following preliminary design concepts that will be presented to council at a later date. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item 7.1. Land Use Bylaw Amendment 841-P-02-22, second and third reading. Melanie's presented on that already, so we have 3 options that council provides second and third reading for LUB 841-P-02-22, or that council tables, or that council refuses. Can I get someone to sponsor? Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor.
Would you accept a friendly amendment to change that just to second reading?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of second reading? Carried unanimously. Can I get a sponsor for third? Councillor Chapman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Okay, moving on to agenda item 7.2. Traffic Safety Bylaw 843-R-03-22, first reading. Manager of Community Policing, Mark Anderson, to present. Welcome, Mark.
We, last fall when we started reviewing the traffic safety bylaw and with a view to enforcing jake brake legislation, we initiated a full review of the traffic safety bylaw And we've highlighted a number of things that required updating, primarily just for language of how the bylaw reads so that it corresponds with current legislation provincially under the Traffic Safety Act and other acts that we parallel here in the town. And in order to make it properly enforceable and properly worded, we undertook to rewrite the bylaw. There was also 5 areas of concern that we identified during our review process, which are outlined here for you. The first 2 involve the parking of unattached trailers on the roadways, primarily the RVs that are allowed to park on the roadway between May long weekend and Thanksgiving, and also allowing trucks to travel off the truck route going to and from residential properties without trailers on them. While we were doing our review and speaking with other municipalities who had similar regulations in their areas, they had opted to remove them because they were informed there were some legal liabilities where the town would allow people to violate rules that are already under the Traffic Safety Act, which are prohibited. So I'm bringing those forward to you for your consideration on whether or not we should be looking to remove those from the traffic safety bylaw or engaging in community engagement and also a legal opinion on whether or not we actually do expose the town to liability for allowing that to continue. Those would be the first 2 items that I'm looking to review. The third item relates to special events. While we were reviewing the bylaw, we noticed that we don't have any bylaw actually governing special events. We have some practices in place and some guidelines that our community events coordinator uses in order to issue permits, but it wasn't written anywhere in our bylaws or regulations. So I'm proposing in the Traffic Safety Bylaw Amendment a section covering special events, parades, etc. that would then put that right into the bylaws, which would give us the authority then, if we have special events coming here, people that don't follow through the procedure, we would have a method by which we could require that they do. I'm also proposing that we remove Section 18 of the bylaw and replace it with a new section dealing with view obstructions. Section 18 specifically in the old bylaw dealt all with sight lines, corner sight lines, view obstructions, which is all covered under the land use bylaw and under the community standards bylaw already. So the sections in the traffic safety bylaw were not exactly the same as the other ones, and it was really a redundant section altogether, which we don't need in traffic safety bylaw. So I'm proposing that we remove that from the rewritten traffic safety bylaw. And then the only section to put back in would be temporary signs. So when we have somebody's advertising a special event and they put out a mobile sign, that we have some way that we can deal with that in an exigent circumstance if it's creating a view obstruction or a traffic hazard, that we wouldn't have to go back through planning. That would just allow our bylaws people to deal with that at the moment. And the last thing that I'm proposing, which will come up later, is that we remove the penalties from the traffic safety bylaw and incorporate them into our rates and fees bylaw, so that we're consistent that way with our other regulations in town. And also that at the same time we remove the graduated penalties sections. Right now we have 3 penalties for every offense. I'm proposing that we have 1 penalty for every offense. If we have somebody or a particular instance that's a repeat, we can deal with it as a summary conviction, which is already provided for in the bylaw, which would then allow a court to set a penalty for egregious offenses or repeat offenders.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start with the first one, disallowing the parking of unattached RV trailers on town streets from May long weekend until Thanksgiving. Is there any questions or comments on that one? Councillor Beekman.
I'm just kind of curious, what types of liabilities would we potentially be exposed to by allowing that to continue?
If we permit somebody to park their vehicle on the street, somebody has a collision with it or is injured, the town theoretically could be held partially responsible for that because we have allowed that person to violate the Traffic Safety Act, which prohibits any unattached trailer from being on a roadway.
And is it safe to assume that our bylaws can supersede a provincial statute?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I'm curious, you're talking unattached, or is that what you're, so basically then they can park all year attached? Like, isn't it in the city of Lethbridge, you're 3 days, 72 hours?
That's the same here. That would cover any trailer that's attached is still only allowed to be parked on a roadway for 72 hours.
Thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. Through to Mark Anderson. I guess what we want clarity with is that people from May till September can still take their RVs home, and if they park it on their driveway, there's no problem with that.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, that's correct. The Traffic Safety Act and our bylaw would say the same thing, which is that as long as the vehicle is attached to the vehicle drawing it, so the RV is attached to the vehicle drawing that trailer, it can be parked on the roadway or on their property legally. It's only when it becomes detached from a vehicle that it would become a liability. And I believe the reasoning for that is that an RV or a trailer does not have to be insured when it's being pulled or when it's being used. It's covered under the vehicle that's, the liability portion is covered under the vehicle that it's attached to. So if it's not attached to any vehicle, there's no way to attach any, if there's liability, who do you attach that liability to then?
Okay, so I want clarity again that when somebody takes their RV home and parks it on their driveway off street, they can leave it unattached.
That's correct.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I've asked the question before why we have this bylaw, because it does supersede a provincial statute. But I know the last time we visited at a council level, there was a lot of backlash from the community, so I would definitely want this to go out before we make a decision, because you know, we didn't overturn it the last time because there was a great turnout of residents when we were discussing it.
If I may, Mayor, it would be my suggestion, I would propose to council that before we make those changes, those particular two changes, I would like to seek out the opinion of our council so that we actually have a written decision from council and not just verbal information supplied on a phone. And number two, that we do a proper community engagement where we pose the question to the people of Coaldale, to our townsfolks, and also include in that community engagement the written opinion of our council so that people have the full facts. Then they can make their decision. I mean, ultimately, it's up to the town whether or not they wish to assume that liability if it exists.
So, question for you then. Are you saying that it's going to be an education process to educate the general public that this cannot happen, like we're going to take that away from them, that they won't be able to allow their trailers, because there's no use having public meetings if we already know what the end result is going to be if we're trying to supersede the statute?
I think we should make that decision after we get an official opinion from the council for the town.
Okay, but you think we should get, I think it's more important to get a legal opinion on this.
I agree, Mayor, that's what I meant. I think we should get the lawyer's opinion first in writing, and then we can move on to the next.
Okay, so we can make a separate motion for this one that we table item number 1. So I'm looking for a motion that we table disallowing the parking of unattached RV trailers on town streets from May long weekend until Thanksgiving, until we hear back regarding a legal opinion. Something to that effect work? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if we could include in that also the second item there about allowing large trucks off the truck route. If we're already going to seek the opinion, we might as well include that in that same motion if it's not inappropriate.
Oh, good point. So items 1 and 2. Okay, can I get someone to sponsor that? Councillor Beekman? Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, moving on to number 2 then. Let's ask if there's any questions from council regarding disallowing off-truck route permitting provisions, repeal of the Fairway Drive off-highway vehicle traffic bylaw. So Is this the one where in the package it talks about if a trucker wants to bring his truck home to clean it and vacuum it or work on it?
Okay, thank you for the question, Mayor. The bylaw, the way it's written now, does not allow them to repair it. It does allow them to clean it and restock it and leave. And it has not been abused except by one individual that we know in town. Other than that, the people who've used it have used it in accordance with what it is, come in and out in the same day.
Okay, so then regarding the legal opinion on this one, what part of that would you want the legal opinion on?
The actual legal opinion that I'm looking for in item number 2 would be the Fairways Off-Highway Vehicle Traffic bylaw portion, which was actually written in 1987, which allowed people with golf carts who are living in fairways to drive on the streets in that community to get to the golf course. That's the one that I think should be going before the lawyer, that part of item number 2.
Okay, and then is there a current bylaw now that prevents somebody that has a golf cart that lives in Parkside and wants to drive that thing all the way home?
Yes.
Okay,
The bylaw, which it permits golf carts specifically only to fairway.
okay. Okay, any further questions on 1 and 2? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you. To you as well, the agreement, I think, with the Fairway group, so there's all those people around Land O'Lakes, right? They have their own separate agreement for taking golf carts home. I don't think it applied to anybody else, say, for example, in Cottonwood or Westgate or Waterfront, so to say, but, you know, we want to make sure that
That's the one that Mark's talking about. They want to repeal that one for Fairway Drive. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions on 1 and 2? Okay, moving on to number 3. Adding a new chapter to the bylaw, special events, including permitting application sections. Any questions or comments on that one? Number 4, remove section 18 of bylaw and replace with a new section dealing with signs causing view obstructions. Any questions, comments? Deputy Mayor Avery.
Thank you. It's not really specific to that, but obstructing view so we put up these new speed limit signs in the playground zone. Then we put a 10-inch new sign up on an avenue that hasn't had a school zone on it for the last 25 years. 845 is good, but the rest of them are this big and you can't see it. And then we've got our CPOs out there running laser, catching people on this new sign. And it's education right now, I understand, but if we're going to educate, we need to make sure it looks like we cheaped out. It looks like we're running a cash cow. You know, is what's coming to me.
Deputy Mayor, thank you for the question. I actually didn't pick the new sign size. That's what we had in stock. I can certainly speak to our operations manager and have the larger signs put there, certainly without any problem at all. As it is now, there have been no tickets issued in any of the zones. It's only been warnings and education.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last one, Councillor Chapman, did you have a question?
Yeah, just to follow up, thank you, Mayor. Just as a follow-up to Deputy Mayor Avery's question on signage, and of course, had a lot of questions regarding Highway 45 at John Davidson School. And would you be able to offer the public general clarity as to that section of road, being that the information they feel that would be correct, number one, would be that the fence along John Davidson would keep the kids off the road, and number two is if Alberta Transportation had approved that section for reduction in speed.
Thank you, Councillor. In answer to the first part of your question, there is a fence along there. However, it opens onto a crosswalk that crosses 20th, where we do have a number of young people crossing the streets, going to and from school, also going to and from the playground zones, also other pedestrians that are going over there on weekends, not just children, but other people using that area as well. And in answer to part two of that question, yes, Alberta Transportation was consulted last fall before it was brought to council in the first instance, and they have been involved in the process ever since and in approving the sign placement.
Okay. Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Rijn. I got a question to Mark. Are we redoing the playground zones in the pavement, like the markings? I noticed if you're going to do that, the one on 845, I feel it should be at least 200 meters or more to the south to give people a chance to slow down, or even a sign like Jason is recommending, something that gives them fair warning, because if you're in a 18-wheel big truck loaded, you ain't going to slow down that quick. It gives them a little bit of time to react before the photo radar or our officers.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Again, Terry May is in charge of all of those aspects of signage. I do know that he was unable to do any road painting in 2021 just because there was no supply of paint. We had there's a number of playground zones in town that need repainting. They're getting pretty marked, as well as no parking areas that are getting pretty worn out, and we just have not had the product in which to do it. Would you like to add something? Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Thank you. Yeah, as for the,
Justin,
road
just
painting-
before you start, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Justin McPherson. I'm the Director of Operations. I wasn't the lead on this project, as you said, Terry May was, but I have a pretty good understanding of road signage. As for the street painting, that is a good recommendation. The standard, what we paint off of, is Alberta Transportation Standard. So they tell us how far to put those speed signs back. We can engage them and make sure that that is standardized. We haven't done painting yet this year because it's winter. Last year we did about half the painting in the town because the paint supplies, our paint suppliers, blame COVID due to low supply. Looks like that might be a problem again this year. So we've ordered early in hopes that that's going to happen. So looking forward to painting this year. I'm kind of giving everyone a heads up. We're going to get done with everything we can, but we do prioritize things. So 845 will be that priority, number one, of course. So, but as for the distance of the speed warnings, it is standardized by Alberta Transportation.
Okay. Moving on to number 5, remove the penalty sections of the traffic safety bylaw and include them in the rates and fees bylaw. Eliminate the $20 fine reduction and progressive penalties in favor of a specified penalty. Any questions or comments on that one? Okay. And then just when I was going through the bylaw, there's you have for times you have AM and PM, and then in some areas you have an example 7:30 in the forenoon and 9 in the afternoon. So maybe we can standardize those at the same time. And then also you're referring to handicap parking and then they also call it accessible parking. So which one is it through Alberta Transportation? It's handicap parking?
It's actually accessible parking.
Okay.
The handicapped is now not used throughout the industry or through government regulations. And I do apologize. I've read the old traffic safety bylaw so many times. I have probably missed a few things that need to be changed and wording to be corrected.
That's why it was called the working document.
That's correct.
Okay, and then the other question I got for you is there anything in on our bylaw, or is it a provincial one regarding helmets for kids on bicycles and skateboards?
We do not have anything in our town bylaws regarding helmets for kids on bicycles. It's an excellent suggestion. There's nothing that I'm aware of provincially in legislation for that either.
Because I thought something came in, you had to be 16 or 16 and under, they had to wear a helmet a few years ago, but.
I can certainly research that and get back to you.
No, you don't have to get back to me, I just wanted to bring that up. Okay. Okay, so any further questions, comments for Mark? Okay, so I need someone to make a motion that council provides first reading to the traffic safety bylaw 843-R-03-22 and direct administration to coordinate public engagement on the proposed changes. Councillor Reese, any further discussion? Councillor Beekman.
Clarifying that also includes that we're waiting on legal counsel for items 1 and 2, correct?
We made a separate motion for that. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Good job.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Okay. Gentlemen, we just have to back up or jump ahead to agenda item 8.1. So speaking on agenda item 8.1, the draft council strategic plan, we have Tracy Lawrenson with Paragon Strategic Services with us this evening via Zoom. For our viewers at home, I wanted to share that Tracy has worked with our council twice as a governance facilitator since the new council's election on October 18th of 2021. First time was in late October, focusing on council's roles, the legislative framework, and how best to serve our community during this term as a member of town council. And most recently, Tracy facilitated our 2-day strategic planning sessions held in late January. Tracy will be introducing the draft council strategic plan to council this evening. And Tracy, on behalf of council, I wanted to thank you for your work that you put into this draft plan. And I also wanted to thank the 491 Coldell residents that took the time to fill out the community vision survey in early January. Your input helped craft the draft strategic plan for our 21 to 25 council term that is before us this evening. It was then Tracy's task to compile all this information into our draft council plan. So welcome, Tracy. We're looking forward to having you walk council through us this evening. 1 second, Tracy. We just got to get volume.
Testing.
Okay, we have you now.
Okay. So first of all, was amazed by the response to the citizen survey. It is extraordinary to get that level of engagement on the survey you did. So a compliment, first of all, to the community for being engaged, and that, as just to reiterate, informed council, but also council did a pre-session survey on what mattered most to the 7 of you. And so going into the workshop, just for the benefit of those that weren't there, we started with why, what matters most, what does the community and council value about the small town feel with the big city accomplishments that you've got. There's been a lot of successes in your town, and this council has, really, it was an interesting process to go through in council because there was very robust discussion, but ultimately ending up in a series of themes. Now, Mr. Mayor, is it all right if I share my screen?
It is. Please do.
Can I? Is my screen showing?
Yes, it is.
I'm not hearing you all, so.
Your screen is showing.
It looks like the hub got muted. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. You just got muted there somehow. So the process of strategic planning is really starting at the highest level with what matters most to council, and then moving down to ultimately the projects and initiatives that inform that. And so just some of this still needs to be built out. This is just a draft that will be editable by the town. So strategic plans shouldn't be cast in stone, nor should they change weekly. So finding that good balance of being able to tweak the language and adjust things as they happen. But the approach that council took, which is certainly one that I support, is that a list of projects is not in and of itself a strategic plan. Council really spent a lot of time on why these projects mattered. So these were the 6 core themes that ended up coming up out of the discussions that occurred at the workshop. If you see me looking off, it's because my screen's over here. So basically what we've got is a statement under each of these 6 themes, and then the areas of focus. And with your permission, I won't walk through each and every one of these, but I know that council has had a chance for a review of this. in essence, what it does is capture for each of these the 3 or 4 core areas. So just for example, under public safety, statistically the town is very safe, but there was discussion about ensuring that people feel safe. And so you'll see that there's a focus on the collaboration with the CPO and our CMP. Also, there was discussion about how can individual residents get involved in enhancing the safety of the town. Pedestrian safety is an issue. This also comes up in the advocacy initiatives, particularly with the location of the school. And then just a recognition, one of the things that was loud and clear in the citizen feedback was how much they value the work that's done by the fire department with the town. But you'll see for recreation, for example, you're underway with your recreation center, which is a huge initiative, but also that events be a priority. And the citizen survey highlighted a number of initiatives, basically a lot of interest from the residents around a second sheet of ice, whether that was inside or outside, a pool, and even skateboard, a little bit less, significant but important, skateboarding. And so council did identify that, consistent with the desire to have community engagement on key decisions, that the council likes the ideas of those, but those survey responses came forward in the absence of any form of fiscal framework, so that residents weren't able to assess, how, the cost consistent with that. So that was certainly, you'll see when it comes up later, that was something that I took out of our discussion and put into the framework of the plan. Service excellence, critically important to council, and in particular roads and sidewalks, some of those things that are important but not necessarily real sort of glitzy things. This council really felt, and the citizen survey highlighted, the need to expedite the work that's being done in those areas. Waste collection and asset management also came up under this with utility infrastructure as well. Just checking in with council, am I going through this in the way that you had hoped?
You're doing an excellent job, Chrissy.
I can't see faces when I've got my screen up here. So the economic vibrancy and health of Coaldale was something that was very important both to the citizens and to council in developing this strategic plan. And so there was, first of all, a discussion that in addition to looking out for new business, really looking at existing business health and, initiatives around making it, just recognizing that those businesses that are already in Coaldale are very important to this council. Housing came up under community growth. The opportunity for people to, in particular, age in place. The recognition that being close to Lethbridge, there may be certain times where housing in a larger center might make sense, but that people should, to the extent possible, be able to stay in Coaldale as they age and be connected to that, in that small town community. The regulatory environment, council was clear that through their town manager, really continuing to look at opportunities to reduce red tape and be easy to work with. However, council did discuss that doesn't mean that the rules aren't important, because Coaldale's an amazing little town. And so part of development and attracting new business is balancing attracting those new businesses, but also protecting the residents and businesses that are already there through the use of some of the land use planning. Oh, we got a duplicate there, so we got to clean that age in place up. One of the things that Coaldale's been extraordinarily successful with is using other sources of funding, grants and otherwise. And so continuing to focus on that. But council did discuss that they want to make sure that alternative sources of funding are used to augment what already makes sense, not to have the town doing things just because there's a grant there. And the one thing that was really important is the role that Birds of Prey plays in the town, and a focus on making sure that that important relationship is something that is supported both as a economic and tourist driver, but also it's in the past formed as a part of the town's identity. Just checking in before I go to the last two. We're all good?
We're good, Tracy.
Okay. Coaldale's had, again, very strong success in the past that this council wants to leverage and enhance around relationships. And the most important one and a real defining attribute for this council is that meaningful two-way communication with residents, is really ensuring, obviously the public won't be able to be involved in every single decision council makes, but I know that there's already been initiatives around council focusing on communication frameworks so that the time of the public is respected. They're not asked on every little thing, but really defining, are we informing the public all the way through to collaborating with regional partners and otherwise. But this is something that's significant to this council and really is a hallmark of the type of council they want to be. The connections with other levels of government, again, Coaldale has for a relatively small community been successful, and this council with the really focusing on the outreach with levels of government to make sure that you're at the table on things that affect you. And the not-for-profits in the community are an important part of those relationships. Public-private partnerships, finding the appropriate balance of doing it yourselves as a town, but also making sure that for initiatives that aren't ongoing, using private sector expertise to enhance the quality of work that you get, but also the turnaround time and not unnecessarily inflating town staff for public-private partnerships. There was a strong discussion around the table around how much this council values the team of people that they rely on to deliver to deliver on this strategic plan, as well as on the day-to-day work, because a council strategic plan is sort of the high level, longer term initiatives, but this council is very aware of the importance of the day-to-day work that the staff do. And then again, just focusing on good governance. And your worship, you mentioned the 2 sessions we've already had, as well as the session on communications that you're doing. This council has really decided that they want to define themselves as a good governance council and has already started strong with that. And then this last one is actually the biggest one, and it's the product of the others, which is really recognizing that when we talk about a small town feel in Coaldale, which came up throughout the citizen survey, it really was around connections and relationships, welcoming, accessible. A lot of these words came up numerous times throughout the planning sessions. So these events, that connect the people, and coming out of COVID, really finding opportunities, not just through events, but also through place with the new downtown civic square, and, finding opportunities to draw the community together. Green space was identified, and in particular, the need to make sure that the green space, you've got manicured as well as unmanicured, but also that your watering and that sort of thing is environmentally responsive, that there's ways to use different types of watering and that sort of thing with regard to the environmental impact of those sorts of things. The downtown core is a really, council was excited about some of the opportunities there. And also talking more about diversity. And I know you as a council have already undertaken some dialogue around those sorts of things. So those are the 6 key themes. Council also identified what are the top projects that come out of those themes. And this language is a little clumsy, so it can be tightened up a bit, but really making sure that the recreation center is something that, it's as designed going to be a first-class center. And that is a huge initiative in and of itself. I talked a bit about the community engagement around other recreation amenities that certainly in the citizen survey came up as important. The civic square is big project as well for that welcoming downtown. But some of these are also particularly important and maybe a little less sexy, but the expediting those improvements in the roads, the stormwater infrastructure, the new industrial park, identifying ways to diversify the tax base by enhancing industrial growth. And also just making sure that the infrastructure is in place for the community growth that's planned. I'm almost done here. Advocacy initiatives as well. And a number of these ended up coalescing around safety and medical care. The first one, though, is the RCMP and the cost sharing, advocating to make sure that, town residents should be paying their fair share, but no more than their fair share. And there's some advocacy around that. Medical times for response time for medical was an issue that that this council identified. Really, they'd like to have dialogue with other levels of government. Highway access remains an issue, with the highway going right through the middle of town, and pedestrian safety relates to that. And again, the urgent primary care. Coaldale is fortunate that it's got proximity to other medical resources, but having that right in town was an important advocacy initiative. I'm not going to go through the whole rest of this, but executing the plan is really where your town manager and team need to ensure that this isn't just a plan that goes onto a shelf, but that it aligns the efforts and initiatives that your town manager is leading throughout the organization. And so you'll see for each of these, if council approves this direction, under each of these, what I recommend you do is ask the team to identify what projects and initiatives, other than those priority ones, certainly they'll be populating into this, but what are the other things, even if they're more operational, that your staff at all levels are doing that move the needle on each of these important priorities that council's identified. And so once this is approved by council, the handoff would be back to your town manager and the team to populate this, and then to report back to council on what should be measurable under these projects and initiatives, very verb focused, complete this, finalize the RFP for that, so that you as a council don't lose track of what the momentum and action is towards these initiatives and directions that you've given for council, or pardon me, for staff. I talk very fast, so any questions from that?
Thank you, Tracy. I'll open it up to council. Any questions? You did an excellent job. No questions.
Okay. Thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of this process. It was an experience of a council with a lot of very different views, but being willing to work together and negotiate and listen to each other to arrive at a plan like this that should move the community forward. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Tracy.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, so based on Tracy's presentation, we have 3 options. Option 1, that council approve the draft council strategic plan as circulated and direct administration to bring back a corresponding action implementation plan. Option 2, that we approve the draft council as amended, or council 3 that, or number 3, I should say, that council table the discussion of this matter until additional information is gathered. I get someone to sponsor one of those 3 options, please. Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Make a motion that
Thank you.
implementation plan.
Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor of option number 1? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 7.3, taxation of vacant residential land policy C-021, and we have our CFO, Kyle Bouchamp, and Cameron Mills, our Director of Growth and Development, presenting this evening. The floor is yours, gentlemen.
Okay, thanks and good evening. So we're revisiting policy C-021 here, again, taxation of vacant land. This policy was previously approved by the last council on the September 13th, 2021 council meeting. Prior to that, though, it was in talks for a couple of years, so current council may or may not be familiar with this. The essence of the policy was to look at residential land that's been vacant for a period of time, which was determined 5 years or longer, and to subject those parcels to a tax rate of 2 times the residential rate. The intention of this was to, there is an extra burden on municipal forces for vacant residential lot from weed control, bylaw enforcement, and also to promote and encourage residential growth and development on that. So with this tax year being the first year the policy would actually be applied to the tax roll, we wanted to revisit that with council before it's actually implemented to ensure that we're still maintaining the spirit that's designed from the policy. One of the main reasons for that is when this was previously brought forward towards council, it was estimated that it would apply to about 5 to 10 lots. However, with slightly slower development in some of the areas in Coaldale, for 2022, we're expecting this to be approximately 70 lots. So with that being said, we're happy to take any questions specifically on the policy. We do have the previous staff report and policy attached for council's review. So with that, we do have a couple options to consider today. One is that council can direct administration to apply the current policy as it stands. Number 2, we can rescind the policy that was previously implemented. Number 3, we can waive policy for this year and revisit for 2023. Or council can direct administration to proceed with any alternative options. With that being said, I'll turn the floor back to council for any questions.
Thanks, Kyle. Councillor Reese has a question.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. My question is in this agreement, this new thing, is it still going to be waiving requirements for large-scale investors?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll address that question if I may. So one of the things we looked at, excuse me, when we were developing this policy was, the opportunity to specifically exclude certain types of users, which is to say large-scale developers. And what we found in our consultation with legal counsel was that that was not possible. We can't have tax policy in place that's written based on who people are. It's specific to land and only land. And so we didn't have that option. And that was what created some challenges with this. We've got, fundamentally what we have is we have an issue that is relatively specific in nature. We're looking at certainly some concerns that have arisen from individual parcels here and there that might be purchased and then sit in neighborhoods that become fully developed, and they might sit for 10 years or more, and they have weeds and generate issues, and neighbors are concerned. And so this policy, as I sort of describe it, it's sort of a blunt instrument, right? It's sort of like, I use the analogy to say it's sort of like doing surgery with a chainsaw, right? It's not specific, and it gets a little messy, and it's not ideal, but it's the only tool from a tax policy perspective that's really possible for us as a town. And unfortunately, what can happen from it is then we get issues like this, where we say there have been lots that have been created in certain neighborhoods that have now sat for this 5-year period, and the policy doesn't allow us to preclude those as a matter of the policy. With any of these charges, we have the opportunity on a lot-by-lot basis to consider waiving the charges. We could potentially prepare a list, if we had that direction from council, of sort of what might constitute those types of lots, and do that in advance of waiting for the lot owners to request them individually. But there is no way for us to do that preemptively before the tax, as a matter of the policy, to say moving forward to include large-scale developers from it. Unfortunately, that's just not an option for us.
Any other questions for Cameron or for Kyle? So just so that I get it clear, if we have a developer, like an existing development right now in Coaldale, so if they have not sold their lots, this will apply to them.
It will. So generally speaking, and this was part of the discussion with council previously. So generally speaking, developers won't create enough lots at a specific subdivision where they're anticipating holding those lots for a period of 5 years or more. So typically they would create enough lots where they might turn those over in 2 to 3 years. But of course, as we know, development is not something where you can exactly forecast how many lots you're going to sell. And we do find this year that there are a couple of neighborhoods that have created enough lots where they're holding those for a period of more than 5 years. And now those lots are subject to the policy as it's written.
Okay, so to use Fieldstone, for instance,
Right.
that development is completely done and they have lots for sale. And so this will pertain to that developer, even though it's no fault of his own, because he's unable to move those, and he's not going to lower the price because obviously his price point has to be where it needs to be for cost recovery.
Yeah.
So my concern is for a situation like that, and where I would really like to see this policy be amended for is someone that buys a property, whether it be residential or commercial, from a speculation point of view. So if you got someone that is hoping that he can make money on this lot in 5 years, 6 years, those are the ones that the second owner are the ones that I feel should be taxed. So I would like you to speak more on that, if you would, please, Cameron, how you feel about that.
Yeah, thank you. So I certainly understand the concept behind that. The problem we had in crafting the policy is that the direction was very clear that we couldn't have the policy speak to types of ownership, if you will. So we don't have the ability to have a policy which clearly states the policy won't be applied to a developer creating new lots, will only kick in after a lot has been purchased, or these types of things. Based on how our legal counsel's interpretation of how the municipality needs to go about the taxation process through the Municipal Government Act. And I'm certainly not a lawyer, so I'm not the perfect person to speak to that. But generally speaking, we had obviously if we had the ability to do that within the policy, that would certainly make more sense. But the direction has been very clear that the policy needs to be broader than that. Understanding that, obviously our preference would be to do that. The workaround to that is to say we can certainly at each individual year consider the properties in question that are going to be applied, the policy is going to apply to, and we can waive the policy on an individual basis within every given year. But that creates its own sort of confusion, and it's an imperfect tool. It simply is what it is. The alternative of not having the policy in place creates other challenges with respect to it doesn't provide us for the ability to provide for this additional taxation on those lots where we think it does warrant. So it's the only tool we have available, but we certainly recognize that it's imperfect.
So it's based on like the legal information that you got, that we cannot do what I just explained?
Correct.
Okay. And then is it true that the city of Lethbridge has a policy that if there's in our own industrial park, for instance, if we sell a lot to somebody and they don't develop within 5 years, my understanding is that there's a policy in place that that individual has to sell that property back to the city of Lethbridge for the exact same price they paid for it.
I don't know if the city has a policy necessarily. It's entirely possible that they do. That is something the town does with its own purchase agreements for town-owned property.
Okay.
And we actually generally require construction within, we have the ability to execute it within a year. We haven't executed on that tool. We have some lots that have sat for longer because they were purchased. This was something that we brought in probably in the last 3 years or so. But some lots that were sold, say 5 years ago, might not have had that in place. But it is something that we've been.
And then my last question is, for future development, is there something that can be written into the architectural controls by the developer to address some of this as well?
That's a good question. I don't know. A developer likely could. I wouldn't think that a developer naturally would have that sort of inclination, because this is really solving the town's problem rather than the developers. I think the developer would generally be happy to have the lot sold. But that being said, is there a possibility for the town to require it as part of architectural controls? That would certainly be something we could look at.
And that's what I meant, that the town would require that, because speaking with a developer of Cottonwood,
Yeah.
starting in phase 6, he has that part of his architectural controls. So if that's something that we could ask future developers to do that would help us. We wouldn't be the bad person then.
Yep, that's certainly something we'll consider the next time we have the opportunity to do so.
Okay. Any further questions for either Cameron or Kyle? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor, and maybe still trying to get my head around this. I know we talked about this last fall. Maybe Deputy Mayor Avery can help me with some of the recollection around this conversation, because I thought it was a fairly clear idea back then. But I think in light of some of the economic issues today, whether this might be a valuable tool to use or not, if it's going to disincentivize developers from, buying, more than one lot or 5 lots or 10 lots, that they would not want to consider Coaldale for that matter. But in the meantime, we have a lot of infills that haven't moved in years. And so I think that this might be the strategy to incentivize that infill development, and whether the Economic Development Department can help with that incentivization process to help people move those lots. One example we had a number of years ago was that 3 for free, and I don't know if you were here then or not. It might have been before your time, but Kalen would remember that 3 for free program where we did incentivize people to develop those undeveloped lots, and that's how we got some development out by Westgate, and new gas station came in, and so there was a few lots that did move through the 3 for free rather than this other tax policy.
Okay, any further questions or comments? So our options this evening, option number 1, that council direct administration to proceed with applying policy C-021 as currently stands for 2022, that council rescind policy C-021, that council temporarily waive policy C-021 and revisit for 2023, or option 4, that council direct administration to proceed with alternate options. Councillor Beekman, did you have your arm up? Okay. Councillor Chapman.
I'll make a motion to go with option number 3, that council temporarily waive this policy number C-021, revisit for 20.
Any further discussion? I'll call the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, moving on to agenda item 9.1, Operations Department Update. Justin McPherson, Director of Operational Services, will be presenting this evening. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you, and good evening, Council. I apologize, the presentation you have in your agenda is an old presentation. The new one is up on the screen now, so thank you, Lana, for getting that ready. This is just a quick operations update to bring up to speed what we've done so far this year. Just a few small projects, a few purchases in our fleet department. So we'll go to the next slide. I want to start with the Kinship Pond. This is the pond in Cottonwood. This project was dredging of the Cottonwood Storm Pond, required to maintain operational effectiveness. So the progress, obviously it doesn't look like this anymore. The pond was dredged on the week of February 21st to 25th. Luckily the weather cooled off enough for the ground to freeze where we didn't do a whole bunch of damage, but we definitely made a little bit of a mess like we thought we would. In this project update, I'm also including our selection process. So the budget was $35,000. The actual low bid was $27,900, and this was quoted by 3 contractors. Again, we selected the low bid. Go to the next slide. This is the
Can we
pitch.
ask questions while we're going?
Yep, for sure. Feel free to interrupt me as we
So
go.
the pond, did you just clean it out or did you increase the depth?
We just cleaned it out. There's a little bit of depth gain, but not much. It's just there's quite a bit of sludge in the bottom. The plant life that was there should grow back. We didn't remove any of the roots.
Because some of the concerns were that the fountains were sucking up muck. There wasn't enough clearance for them.
Yeah, exactly. So now those should be enough clearance for those fountains to work properly.
Okay, thank
It'll be easier
you.
to install them as well. So
Thank you.
this is during construction. As you can see, the equipment's in there, making a little bit of a mess. We're waiting for the weather to change. You'll see our Parks Department assisting us going in there and cleaning up the park and any of the track marks that were left by the heavy equipment. So go to the next slide, please. We just ordered this. This is the old single axle dump truck. I couldn't get a picture of the new one because they are apparently very hard to find right now. This is something we were a little worried about, but we did get 2 bids back on it. So our budget was $180,000. The low bid was $131,219. So this is quite a big savings. We were a little bit surprised by this due to the fact it was hard to get. This was tendered on Alberta Purchasing Connection, and the 2 prices there, the low bid was $131,000. So this will be delivered later this year. We're expecting about a 6 to 8 month lead time. So there's a few extra costs on there, like we'll put a rear view camera on it and a couple safety features, but we can expect a pretty good savings on that. So next slide, please. So this is our, every year our utilities department gets prices for their main digs. This is to ensure we're always getting the best price for our service. So that includes valve replacements, hydrant replacements, and service line replacements. So we went out to 3 local contractors, and looks like Dennis Dirtworks was the low bid this time. This is throughout the year. This also includes like emergency digs. So when we have an emergency dig, we have prices set out. So we're not just sole sourcing these at the beginning of the year. We asked 3 contractors to bid on them. Next slide, please. This truck is our new half-ton as part of our fleet replacement program. These trucks are purchased. They're purchased, usually they go to a foreman, and then the other trucks are pushed down throughout the organization, ending in our seasonal staff. We have a truck shortage right now, so this didn't end up, I don't think we'll be selling one this summer. It'll go to our extra seasonal staff. Again, the budget for this was $60,000. This landed pretty close at $55,454, plus there's a beacon and a box liner added to that as well. So that one was pretty close to the budget. We were only able to get the 3 prices because this was actually a pretty hard piece of equipment to find this year for some reason. I heard there's a chip shortage or something along those lines. So next slide, please. So I just pulled some general information from our solid waste fees, solid waste department that is under operations. I just wanted to show some trends from 2018 to 2021. I was kind of surprised myself because in 2020 our solid waste skyrocketed for a little while due to spring cleaning when everyone was isolated at home, but it looks like throughout the year it kind of leveled out. So our fees have consistently gone down. That's mostly due to a new contractor. We saved some money in 2019 due to switching contractors through a tendering process, and our solid waste tonnage is actually pretty consistent. You can see the waste, recycling, and compost. And then I just did a couple rate comparisons for very local. So you have Coaldale is at $29.50, but that's garbage, compost, recycling. Tabor is garbage, compost, recycling. They're 25.13, and then Lethbridge is just garbage and recycling at 21.11. So yeah, that's for all three streams. Slide, please. Yes, of course.
Go ahead.
So our garbage collection, we do it every 2 weeks. Is there a way we can switch that in the winter time? Because we've got our green bins being picked up every second week or every week, and the garbage bins are flowing over, and so people are wondering why we're worrying so much about the composting, because they're not putting their leaves, their lawn of that in the winter months, but their garbage is still overfull every 2 weeks. So would that increase our pricing if we cut back on the green bids and went every 2 weeks and went garbage every week, or?
So to answer your question, Councillor Avery, it would increase the pricing substantially. We looked into this in a 2020 meeting, and it was a presentation to council. I'm just trying to bring it up right now. I have it here. Anticipated this question. We looked at actually increasing it throughout the year, though, back to a weekly pickup. That price increase in 2020, which I'm trying to find here. At the time, we got a quote, depending on the amount of garbage, because we extra tonnage that would be, we expect quite a bit. It'd be about $11,000 to $21,000 per month. We can't just do that month to month. That is it's part of the contract negotiations with someone like that. So we would have to plan ahead of time. But there's a few other things to consider with that. It is industry standard practice now to have bi-weekly garbage pickup with most municipalities. The reason for that is because municipalities are highly encouraging to take out compostable materials and recyclable materials out of that waste stream. And that's why we have the 3 bins. That's to help the environment, and of course it's actually quite a bit cheaper to take compostable materials to a compostable site than compostable materials to a landfill. So it's highly encouraged that way.
Do we have a weight then of what our compost is from September till April? Because I bet it's pretty low.
Oh, it's most likely very low. I can pull that information if you'd like
can
for
we
a future
start
meeting.
cutting back on those pickups to save on money? Because those bins have this much in them, 4 inches in the bottom of them, week when they're getting picked up. So is this a monthly thing in the winter months? Like, we got to look at efficiencies is all I'm thinking is, and garbage bins are flowing over. Composting is nothing in the winter months, or very little, just your table scraps.
Yep.
So just something that I'd like the operations to maybe look at a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Pickering.
Are they on the recycling, or the compost, are they paid by the pound to haul that, or are they paid by the pickup? Because in the winter, like Jason stated, I could go 3 weeks without them picking that green bin. And I can't see them picking picking them containers on the weight, because then in the winter, they'd be running for free.
I can add to that. So it's kind of twofold. So we do pay the contractor essentially a flat rate per bin or residence that's picked up. So whether it's $4 a month for garbage or whatever the rate is, and then we do pay the actual tonnage on the disposal to the garbage that goes to the city of Lethbridge or the recycling that goes there. So the contractor doesn't get paid per tonnage; they get paid just the flat rate.
So then what Jason's saying is if we cut it back to every 3 weeks, he's not going to get paid then per pick up the bin, correct?
that would likely be a fundamental change to the contract, which could change the pricing based on how often they're picking it up. That option would have to be explored a little more in detail. There would be some possible pricing adjustments
I would like to see that.
if the garbage is cut back further or increased further.
What Mr. Avery's saying is he would like garbage picked up every other week. We can go 3 weeks on the recycle or 2. Somewhere in there, there's got to be a savings of them trucks running, right? Not picking them bins up.
Correct.
Garbage is bi-weekly already.
And yeah,
and recycling's by.
We'd like to switch it.
To have the compost bi-weekly and the garbage weekly.
Weekly.
Yeah, we can put that out to the contractor and see what that comes back for a price and report that back to council if that's something you're interested in. One of the items to consider though too is that tipping fees for garbage are quite substantially higher than compost. So naturally, if you have more garbage going to the landfill and less compost, because there may just be the natural tendency to use garbage more and you compost less, if that's the issue, that you're going to be paying more tipping fees. So recycling tipping fees are more than twice the double compost. So it's easy for us to estimate what the pickup rates may be, but until we actually see the usage, there could be a little uncertainty what the actual tonnage price is until 6-12 months down the road when we actually see the trend used by the residents. So just kind of one asterisk to consider as well there.
Deputy Mayor Avery.
So I don't think there'll be more tonnage. There'll be less blowing of garbage down the canal bank from my place. And I'm sure others, because the garbage bin is full, like they're heaping over bi-weekly. So I think we'll get the same tonnage. It's just going to be less mess, because when you dump it in, the bags ain't going to roll off the side because they don't get out of their truck. And then by the time you get home from work, it's blown into your neighbor's yard. And so I think there could be some efficiencies and some efficiencies by going weekly with the garbage.
Yeah,
but
and
no more is going to go into the dump. It's just going to, less is going to blow around Coldell.
that's a possibility. That could happen. Just exploring kind of the what if scenarios. If your compost isn't picked up every 2 weeks now when it's full, you're going to put more stuff in your garbage. Just talking through the options, but yeah, we can look into that.
Councillor Reese had a question.
Thank you, Mayor Rijn. I agree with Councillor Pickering about the possibility of doing it opposite in the winter months, but I understand the complications and the added stresses that could cause and stuff. But I do just want to point out that I guess residents do have the option of getting a second garbage bin, I believe, right? For an amount if their families need more garbage capacity. There is that option.
Yes, there is the option for a second garbage bin for families. This is something we don't advertise openly because it's not something we want to advertise openly, to be honest. It is an option, and it is something that goes through an approval process. We've had, I didn't look at the number, but 4 or 5 in the last 2 years that have came and asked for the second garbage bin. It's a cost of the bin and then a monthly fee.
And I just looked into that for another resident, and it was, correct me if I'm mistaken, but it's $100 for the bin and $14 and change per month.
Yeah, that's right. I believe it's $14.95, but I don't have that sitting right in front of me, and I don't want to quote.
Councillor Chapman? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Councillor
That's
Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and through Justin. Maybe I'm somewhat confused because pre-COVID times, I think we went through this discussion quite extensively about pickup times and spring, summer versus winter time. And I think what's happening is that because of COVID, there is more domestic, cleanups and that sort of a thing. So there might be more, the black bin being used. But because of recycling, it seemed to me that there was less garbage being put into the black garbage bins. So I'm just a little confused as to why there would be more garbage today than there would be for recycling or compost.
The trends say there isn't more garbage overall. That's why we encourage people to use the blue bins and green bins as much as possible to reduce that waste. That's what most municipalities are doing. That industry is actually demanding it, that if your waste comes to the landfill full of recyclables, your tipping fees can go up based on that. So that's why we are highly encourage the use of these bins. I don't have an answer of why families are using more garbage or not. I
just wondered if this was more of a COVID environment, more people staying home during this time.
That could explain it.
Councillor Reese had another question? Oh, sorry, Councillor Beekman?
Let's go, yeah.
Thank you. Just for clarification on those second bins, so that's the $100 plus the 14 a month, and that's passed on to the resident, or is that passed on dispersed amongst all the taxpayers?
That's to the resident directly.
Okay. I like that option a lot better, just simply because I do know a lot of people that are very mindful and diligent in their recycling and composting. I think why we might see an increase in garbage potentially was actually the removal of the plastic bags in the composting. I know a lot of people that stopped composting because of the plastic bag removal. If there was a way we could maybe alter that, I don't know. I don't believe widespread garbage every week would be a feasible option personally.
Councillor Reese?
So if we get that new recycling facility, that will help with the recycling itself, though, will it not? Because we'll be able to put more into recycling, like we won't have to worry about cups with that plastic on it, or the lids as much with certain bottles, for example. Yeah. Like all of that would really help out if we get to that point.
Yes, you're exactly right. We haven't given an exhaustive list of what they can accept and cannot accept, so we haven't announced anything yet. And until they give us that list, I'm hesitant to start speculating on what they can and can't do, because it's the last thing I want to do is come to council and say, actually, we can't include that in the blue bin now, because we've been down that road and it's not very fun. So.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor Van Ryn. Just to close this off, I'd like to make a motion to direct administration to come back with a report on the town's waste collection options, along with the costs attached to each option, including weekly versus bi-weekly pickup for garbage and compost.
Can you just hold that thought for a second, because you're not quite done your presentation, right?
There's just one more slide left.
Okay.
Here. It's not very big, so it's just about our recollect statistics. This is just the app that the residents use to tell when their garbage pickup, when their solid waste and recycling pickup are. We've had a lot of use of it. You know, a lot of people do search it. A lot of people do use it. It's paid off extremely well. It was a good decision by council, I believe 3 or 4 years ago when it was instituted, and we get nothing but great feedback about it. So,
okay.
And that's my presentation.
Thank you. Any other questions for Justin this evening? Okay. Deputy Mayor Avery, could I have you read that motion back one more time, please?
Come back with the report on the town's waste collection options, along with the cost attached to each option, including weekly versus bi-weekly pickup for garbage and compost.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Justin. Okay, moving on to item 10.1, we have a verbal update on the Municipal Planning Commission by Deputy Mayor Jason Avery.
Thank you, Mayor Van Ryn. First off, I'd like to acknowledge that the importance of doing these and you bringing this to our council meetings, Mayor Van Ryn, that the citizens get to hear a little update on what we're doing. So the MPC is a Municipal Planning Commission. This is a committee made up of 3 members of council. So there's Mayor Van Ryn, Councillor Pickering, and myself that sit on it. And then 2 citizen members. We've got Roger Holm and Renee van der Vendel that sit on. Roger is the chair. Mayor Van Ryn is our co-chair. What the committee does is we approve development which exceeds our bylaws as well as area developments. Some of our, since our term began in our first meeting in November, we've approved some subdivision parcels of lands, fence height waivers, secondary building height waivers, waivers for property line distance, the size of a secondary building, a shed that exceeded and then closer to the property line, discretionary use stuff, so businesses, home businesses, and these are just to name a few of the efforts of NPC. Our minutes are all available through the town website, so if any members of council or citizens would like to read those, they are available, and that is it for my report.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Avery. Any questions? Seeing none, Deputy Mayor Avery, would you care to make a motion to receive your verbal update on the Municipal Planning Commission as information?
Yes, I would.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to item under correspondence 11.1, Municipal Affairs Budget 2022. Minister Rick McIver, dated February 24th, sent us a letter. And is there any questions regarding that? Oh, Deputy Mayor Avery.
And this one is for our CFO, if he doesn't mind. So is this notification along with how you set up your budget for this coming year?
Not exactly. This notification is actually a little more good news than we had set the budget. So initially, they talk about the funding over 3 years and how it's being maintained. When we looked at the funding and they front loaded the 1 year as they talked about, and then they substantially reduced the next 2 years, we had predicted that decrease 2 years as a future trend. So since they're going back to the 3-year average, that actually will get more than we've actually budgeted for MSI. I believe it's close to 40% more than we had budgeted, so it's good news.
So that amount, thank you, that amount that came with the letter that Coldell is going to be receiving $932,914. That's the estimate that they attached to that.
Sorry, I haven't seen that estimate, but I will have to take another look at that and get back. I believe what we had estimated was about $800,000.
Okay.
From my calculation, it was slightly over $1 million.
Because if you look up that letter and you click on that link, it comes up to a graph here that says 2023 Municipal Sustainability Initiative allocations estimates, and the town of Coldell has under the MSI 867,856, and then for MSI operating component an additional $65,058 for a total of $932,914.
Sorry, I understand now. So those numbers are accurate for the 2022-2023 allocation. What I was referring to, sorry, was actually starting in 2024.
Okay.
So in our budget for 2024, we expect our amount should actually go up.
Okay, perfect. Any further questions? Councillor Beekman.
It was just me not being able to find it through the website, but they were talking about the estimated 2022 CCBF allocations there, but when you clicked on the link there was nothing there. Can you provide just any insight on what the allocation for Coldale is on that?
Approximately 520,000.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? I get someone to sponsor a motion that council receive the correspondence from Municipal Affairs as information. Councillor Beekman, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously.
I'll just quickly mention, Mayor, that I'd be interested to hear from our CFO some comparisons from the MSI funding formulas for capital and operating and what the new LGFF that'll be coming out in 24-25. I think they're looking at a different level of transparency than what was utilized before, trying to make municipalities more equitable across the province so that those that received less funding in years past would receive more to assist with more infrastructure needs in their community than had before. So some of it is linear issues, but at Alberta Municipalities last week, they had a fairly clear description of what the new LGFF was going to be proposing for Albertans.
Sorry, so you're looking for comparison for other municipalities for Coaldale? Because until they actually announce it, what the new funding is in the allocations in a couple of years from now, we won't have that data. Part of the hard thing with this framework too is to make these estimates is sometimes it can be speculation on our point because they've tied it to future revenues, and as we know with oil up and down, we could make a projection now that is totally different in 2 years. So we can provide quick estimates where we, that estimate at 40% more is just kind of the off the cuff calculated number that we have, but anything further now might just be a little speculation from that standpoint.
And you're absolutely right. Now that you've triggered my mind here a bit, it is based on revenues as well. And of course, I think some municipalities are much more efficient or effective with their taxes and how they're handled. And so this new formula will try to kind of deal with some of the more infrastructure issues and the capital items that are needed in the community. And of course, they want to ensure that municipalities have the tools and the resources to move forward with capital projects that, for example, arenas and pools and that are aging and will need replacement. So they want to focus on that as a real key item.
Okay. Any further questions for Kyle? Okay. We made the motion on that already, right? Didn't we? We did. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to, we're going to be going into closed session. So I will be needing a motion for that council move into closed session at 6:59 p.m. in accordance with Section 197-2 of the Municipal Government Act to discuss matters exempt from disclosure for the following items. Item 13.1, subject to FOIP Section 16, third-party business interests, and Section 17, third-party personal privacy. Item 13.2, subject to FOIP Sections 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29, economic or other interests. Item 13.3, subject to FOIP Section 16, third-party business interests, and Section 17, third-party personal privacy, and Sections 23, related to advice from officials, and Sections 24, disclosure harmful to economic or other interests of the public body. Motion that council come, I need someone to sponsor that motion, please. Councillor Saylor, any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. So let's take a